Why would someone in technology be interested in writing?
There are the outside reasons and the inside reasons. And the outside reasons are often obvious, right? You can become known as an expert in your field. But I do love the internal stuff. You don't have to write a book. You can just start journaling. Journaling in the morning what your goals are for the day, or just checking in with yourself emotionally.
From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Dhanda.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, it's imperative that we build the right human skills for the future. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable.
Hey, Nicole, thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to know what superpower you're going to bring to this particular episode.
I'm going to bring the superpower of automatic writing, which is a very special type of writing that has nothing to do with normal writing, typing, or journaling.
Oh, now that's interesting. And it doesn't involve AI.
No, it involves you, yourself, your pen, paper, and your subconscious.
Oh, brilliant. Right. Now I'm listening 100% because I think this is something that I need for sure. I always tell people, I'm not very good at writing, but I can draw. So I try and avoid writing as much as possible because I don't think I am the best writer. So I'm really keen to hear some of your tips. Now, you're based in the UK, but your name suggests you're from somewhere else originally. So would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I live in the UK, but I am originally German, East German to be more concrete. And yes, I lived in the US, I lived in the UK, I did my PhD here in Cambridge, which is where I'm at right now. Did a postdoc, then I had a lectureship. Then I burnt out and left that career to become who I am now, which is a writer's coach. So I help people write their books. I'm the author of the Write Habit Planner, a productivity planner for writers and anyone who wants to make space for creativity. And if you're someone like an entrepreneur, an author, or a podcaster, or an academic, and you want to write a book and to have an impact on the world, but you don't really know how to go about it, then I'm the person to go to because I can help you figure all that out and get it published.
Oh, nice. And now you've got me curious about your bookshelf because I can see at least one book I recognize. So that's Atomic Habits.
Yes.
But there's a whole library behind you. What are a handful of your favorites that you would say are your go-to book?
Okay, so currently my favorite book is by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. It's an old book. It's a spiritual book, and it really helps me to create space and stillness and presence in my life and get off that train, that hustling train as an entrepreneur and businesswoman that I'm often on. So The Power of Now, I just basically have it by my bedside. It's not even at the shelf you can see right now. And I do really love Atomic Habits because with the writers that I work with, writing is a regular practice and you can have all the best ideas. And if you don't have a regular practice and manage to get into easy routines to write every day or every other day, you are never going to make it to the end of your book. And so half of my time, I'm actually not talking about the book, but about the writer and what's blocking them and how can they create better, teeny tiny habits that seem doable. And all of that is in the book. And it's such a great resource.
Oh, great. Yes, I can absolutely vouch for Atomic Habits. It's actually close by somewhere over here where I can grab it when I need it. So it's always a great book to have. And could you tell us how your love for writing started? You mentioned you studied at Cambridge, but was there a time that led to that where you discovered this passion, decided this was something you really wanted to specialize in?
Yes. So it's a bit cliche, but I used writing as a child when I felt unhappy. So I would have a diary, and when I had a fight with my brother or I felt my teacher was unfair, I would go and write feverishly in my diary. All the rage went into it and all the fun bits too. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was essentially a journaling practice that can be really healing and transformative and cathartic as well. And then I did think for a long time at school, what can I do to make a career out of it? And at the time, the one thing that came to mind was journalism. So I worked for the newspaper of my school, and then I became a journalist for 10 years, which was amazing. I worked for a newspaper in Berlin. Well, so I ended up in academia, which is slightly different, but still writing. I wanted to write a book and go really deep on a topic, which was human rights at the time. And I thought, okay, if I do a PhD, I can instead of a daily deadline and a daily short article, I'll have this time to go very deep into the rabbit hole. And I got stuck in the rabbit hole. I ended up being 10 years in academia, which is another form of writing related job. And then I burned out and had panic attacks and just couldn't do it anymore. And I didn't want to do it anymore because I didn't feel connected to my writing. Everything was about publishing your papers, just so much pressure. And I lost the joy in writing. And so I quit my job and decided, okay, well, what is another thing I can do that has to do with writing? And somehow I stumbled into being a writing coach, really by accident. I couldn't even reconstruct exactly, but people started asking me questions. I started giving tips. I started saying, well, would you like to have a session with me? And somehow organically, I turned into this book and writer's coach, and the business is thriving, and it's amazing. And yeah, but it wasn't really the plan. But all of it had to do with writing all the way through.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think if I look at young people, I say that, as a dad, and I see the world we live in, we put so much pressure on ourselves, or the world puts so much pressure on us to get things figured out in terms of your career. And then you have to find some educational pathway that's going to get you there. And we're having to make these decisions on things that we're going to do for the rest of our lives. When in reality, I speak to so many people on the podcast and I ask them, so what was your journey? And many of them say similar words to yourself. You started off here and then you went this way, then you went that way. And then all these pathways that just somehow came out of nowhere, where I think if we could plan it from start to finish, we definitely wouldn't plan it in this way. So it's quite interesting, isn't it, how we end up in the things that we do without really a 20-year plan. Is that the same for you, do you think?
Yeah. I'm a perfectionist, and every time I switched things, I felt like, oh man, now I need to start over. And just as I've mastered this one thing, journalism, now I'm starting from scratch, and I just felt very stressed. But at the same time, actually, every single time I shed a little bit of my skin and I had to transform. Right? You cannot be that same person and move into a different identity, like journalist, academia, writing coach. All of these are also sort of part of your identity. And in hindsight, I'm quite happy that I did those things because they were challenges. They forced me to look at what I really like, look at where I've just gotten into autopilot rather than enjoying what I'm doing. And I'm sure maybe something else is going to be on the journey in 10 years. Who knows, right? I quite like it because every time it's a sort of transformation and a sort of healing. Some of the wounds are getting healed from the past. Some new things are coming and you discover something about yourself and how you can contribute to the world. As it sounds very big, I do want some meaning in my life. And if that shifts, that is actually a beautiful thing. And I also have children, and I wouldn't expect them to pick one career and do that for the rest of their life. It seems almost nonsensical to me that someone would want to live like that. It would feel to me it would be quite static, and that would not be enjoyable, I think.
And Nicole, if I think about then my audience, and I have predominantly tech people that listen to the podcast, not to say everyone's a techie or from the tech world, why would someone in technology be interested in writing and writing books?
There are the outside reasons and the inside reasons. And the outside reasons are often obvious, right? You can become known as an expert in your field if you write a nonfiction book. You can set the stage for getting more clients. You can make your mark, especially AI. You can write a very trendy book, self-publish it fast, be a known name. People will look up to you for information. And this is external, and that is amazing. And I'm doing that with my own planner. But I do love the internal stuff because every time I work with a writer and they start, even just, you don't have to write a book. You can just start journaling in the morning, what your goals are for the day, or just checking in with yourself emotionally. How do you feel? Do you feel in the hamster wheel, or do you feel quite nicely rested and present? Or journaling for gratitude in the evening, 3 things that went really well. It is so wholesome. It really helps you connect to yourself, to see potentially your blind spots. And I think it doesn't matter if you work in tech or if you are an artist. We all want to make sense of what we're doing every day and to get some meaning and intention for it and a sort of enjoyable feeling. And I do feel when you do write things down, not just thinking them, but writing them down, preferably with pen and paper, it'll give you that. It'll give you that extra layer of connection to yourself.
Oh, and that's really interesting. I don't think I've thought about it from that perspective before. I usually, these days, don't look forward to writing anything because my writing is getting so bad. My handwriting is so terrible. But that's why the computer was there, so I can just type stuff out. But when we're using writing to actually help with some of those inner aspects, what could be a good way to start for somebody? So you mentioned journaling, your day-to-day thoughts and process, but then if I really want to improve over time, what other things could I do to then really ramp that up?
So, of course, it depends on what you want to do, right? If you want to write a book or blog posts, then you need to learn the craft of what is a good hook and what is a good story. How do you bring it across and emotionally connect to the reader? But if you're starting out, I think journaling is an easy way to go into it, right? You could ask yourself questions in the morning. What's the most important thing today? What do I look forward to on this day? What is something I need to be careful about today, right? Something where you might overwork yourself or a difficult meeting. And then I made these questions up on the spot. Everyone might have their own, but just checking in with yourself in the morning. And you could maybe pledge with yourself to write 1 page every morning, right? And just pen and paper or even on the computer, on your phone, just to check in with yourself. Now, if you want to up-level it, I do have a tool that might sound a bit woo to some people, but it's called automatic writing. And that's the superpower we talked to at the very beginning. And that is slightly different. This is where you write and meditate at the same time. It's really a bit weird. I can tell you exactly how it works, but this is sort of writing where you go a little bit deeper into your subconscious and you turn off that constant thinking part of your brain where you think, is it good enough? Am I a good writer? Does it sound good? You turn all of that off and just write whatever comes, asking yourself a few questions, and you will get insights that you wouldn't have gotten if you sit there very rationally thinking through what you're going to write now. So that's where the superpower lies.
So, Nicole, if I wanted to practice this way of writing, could we do a quick example, or is there some examples you can give us that you've used with others?
Yeah. So automatic writing is a very simple practice, which opens up the communication between you and your subconscious. And that's the whole idea, right? You tap into your intuition and find clarity. And essentially, if you want to just start, you need some sort of element to get into a meditative state. You need some sort of questions you're going to ask your subconscious, and you pretend your subconscious is answering and you're writing down the answer. And you have some sort of, I don't want to say you put a timer on, but it's not like an hour-long thing. It's maybe like a 10, 20-minute thing. So the easiest step to start, if you want to do automatic writing, you put pen and paper next to your bedside table, on your bedside table, and maybe put an alarm clock about maybe 10, 20 minutes before you usually get up. Because the nice thing is when you start journaling or automatic writing while you are still sleepy, hopefully all this thinking hasn't started yet. Oh, I need to do this today and blah, 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 right? This is what you can figure out later when you do your goal setting. But automatic writing is meant for you to bypass all of that. So get up a little bit earlier. It's okay if you're sleepy. It's actually really good. And then see how you can get, as a step 2, into meditative state. Now, some people are already really great meditators. They maybe do a 10-minute stillness meditation, count to 10 in their head repeatedly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up until 10 again and again. I'm not so good at that. So I put on my headphones and I go on Spotify or anywhere else and I look for theta wave music. So theta waves are really helpful to get into, let's say, a meditative state. And we can put something in the show notes, a link for that. So you just put on that music. It's very early in the morning. And then you can start envisioning. So When I go into automatic writing, I envision that I have a team of guides around me. So I'm not envisioning my brain and the subconscious. I actually like to envision people, and I can highly recommend it when you're starting. So I envision an older version of myself, my future self. So older Nicole, 10 years from now, much wiser and much more relaxed than me, who knows all the answers because she's been there. And I envision some of my favorite authors, Julia Cameron, Elizabeth Gilbert, meditation teachers, Tara Brach. So I envision a few inspirational people around me. And you can even envision, dead relatives if you like, someone who has been a mentor to you. It really doesn't matter. You just close your eyes and envision them coming into the room with you, compassionately sitting next to you. And once you have your team assembled around you, this is all made up, right? This is just happening in your head. Then you can start asking questions. And that's the next step. What I do would be step number 4. Step number 3 would be finding the team, envisioning the team. Step number 4 is asking questions. And I'm using the questions by Michael Sandler, who wrote a book about automatic writing. He's very spiritual, but this tool is amazing. And the first question to ask is, what do I need to know today? The second question is, who am I? You'd be very surprised what you get. And the next question is, what is my single-minded purpose today? So maybe there is something that you really need to get done today. And it's not about goal setting. It's more about, often I hear things like, you need to rest. Nicole, you need to do less today. Or don't forget your child needs you after school. Things like that. And so you ask the question, you write down the question, what do I need to know today? With your pen and paper. You are still in meditative state. You take deep breaths and you answer whatever comes. And I promise you, in the beginning, you will probably feel a bit stupid doing it, right? It'll feel awkward. You just start writing. And if you can't write, you just do a little doodly thing, and then some words will appear. And if you're lucky, some loving and kind messages appear. Most of the time, in the beginning, you're not quite sure if you're doing it right, but something will come. I can promise you, I've written so many journals. When I started, I felt like this is never going to work. Something will happen. You write it all down, and then you ask a few more questions. You close it down. You say thank you. You can envision your spiritual guides or your inner team leaving the room again if you wanted. Then you take a breath, open your eyes, and then you have a look at what you've written. Because most of the time you might not remember because you were in meditative state. And then you have written 2-3 pages of something that might very much surprise you.
I sometimes, when I'm about to go to sleep, I'll be reading something on my phone, and it's that moment where I'm so sleepy and I'm trying to make out the words, and yet my mind's drifting kind of in that meditative state then. And I can imagine if I was writing stuff down, what sort of things would come to my mind. That would be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll have to try it that way around to see what my brain constructs at that moment, because that would be super interesting. How long does it take for someone to go from kind of zero to really starting to kind of make progress with this technique?
I would say try it for a week. Often in the first week, I used to be quite insecure. I wasn't sure if I was doing it right. Sometimes things would come and I would think, well, that sounds quite harsh. That was maybe more the inner critic speaking, right? And then when I read it later, I needed to realize, oh, this is probably not my benevolent, compassionate, subconscious speaking. This is the ego jumping in and wanting to make me feel bad. So sometimes there's a moment of wondering, but it's a practice, right? As always, I always think that 21 days, if you can get to 21 days, usually the habit is established. That's a good time span, right? It's not too long, not too big, but also not too little. But yeah, if you're just starting, I would say try it for a week and just see how you feel. And because that's even more important than the messages you get or the insights and the intuition that comes out. What I love even more is how I feel while I'm doing it. So I feel very calm. I feel connected. I feel a sort of warm feeling in my chest. I feel quite spacious. And I'm not in that hustling state of doing this and doing that and fulfilling all my goals and thinking about the business. And I'm just in the state where which is meditation basically, right? And presence. I just feel like I can totally let go. And I love that state, especially first thing in the morning when you want to, start checking your socials and look at your email while you're still in bed. It's so unhealthy, right? And I don't do it perfectly. Yeah, I skip days as well. when I do it in the morning, and I just did it this morning, my automatic writing this morning told me do less, put less on your plate. All the while in the day, I'm like piling things onto my calendar, and my automatic writing says, hey, you need a break, right? And so I would never tell myself that while I'm in the busy day from meeting to meeting, but my automatic writing told me that, and I could create that because I was in such a calm and connected state.
That actually brings me on to my next question, which I think you may have somewhat answered, because I was thinking about what are the benefits of this approach and how can people practically use it to help them in their daily life?
Yeah, so many benefits. For example, it helps you make decisions from a deeper wisdom and not from fear and stress. So for example, when I was burned out as an academic, I had a 10-year job. You do not want to let that go. But at the same time, I knew it. I was not well. It was not the right place for me to be in. But I was afraid, having no salary, what would be my follow-on job? Am I going to be a failure? So I wouldn't let me quit. And so I started automatic writing around that time to find some new, potentially slightly spiritual or like slightly wacky things to try. And in my automatic writing, it's told me very clearly, let it go. You are not healthy. You're not loving it. There is so much more coming. If you just leave that job aside, new amazing things will happen for you. And I would have, if someone had told me that in my day-to-day sort of rational thinking, I would have been like, yeah, I don't care. I need salary. But the automatic writing kept going back to that. It kept saying, you are not happy. You don't need to do this job. You are a wonderful, wise woman who can do a million other things, who is creative. And it really encouraged me to do that. And this is how I found that direction. It was very hard. I cried when I typed my resignation letter to my boss, but I did manage to quit, and I had developed that sort of trust that this direction that is shown to me in my automatic writing will lead me to something positive. And it did, right? I earn 3 times as much now, and I'm so much happier. And I would have never found that direction. I would have never bypassed all the fear if I hadn't done automatic writing. So that's one thing, right? That's making better decisions that come from inner wisdom, or I don't know, the universe, whatever you want to think, right? Another one, I think, I've looked it up. There isn't scientific proof as such. A lot of people that do automatic writing just feel healthier. They feel more balanced because it's a way of watching your energy. It's a way of watching, are you going in the right direction? Do you need more relaxation and self-care? All these things tend to come out during that automatic writing session. So I personally have experienced it to make me more healthy. And the third thing is, it made me more creative. So I'm writing a novel and poems, and I'm feeling that my non-creative, sort of my non-fiction writing is also quite creative. I have a ton of amazing ideas in my automatic writing for a new story, or even just actually a creative approach to my business. I feel like I want to create a new course for writers, and I can't figure it out. And I'm sitting there trying to think it through, and it's just not coming. I go in my automatic writing. A few days later, boom, this is what you should do. And I found an innovative solution that I didn't find before. I was just like clinging on to the thinking and problem solving, and it didn't work on that level. I had to go into the subconscious. So those are just a few.
You've gone quite deep there, because I was just thinking, oh, maybe you feel happier, but actually it can really help you with your idea generation, your creativity, as you mentioned. And I think those are all really important things for tech people. That's what we need to be doing. We're constantly told, be more innovative, but no one tells you how. So a great skill to have. We mentioned just briefly, there are different types of writing. So that's kind of the automatic writing. Like, I'm thinking about doing more blogging, and I'd like to do a regular blog if I could. Could you give me some tips on that? Like, how can I make my blog writing better and improve the way I write?
So I think there are all these stages when you write a blog. First of all, you need some sort of idea, right? And often that idea centers around maybe a problem or a puzzle you want to solve. And so what I do in the beginning when I try and flesh out a blog post, what I will do is I will write down, let's say, 10 ideas of things I want to solve. I often connect it to a problem. Otherwise, it's a bit wishy-washy, but the problem of writer's block, for example, right? So I write that down. And then I write down not just what the problem is, but I write down for who is this important. And otherwise, I always think it's important for everyone, but I need to really nail it down. So I often say, okay, well, it's for a writer who is also a business person and who is really stressed out and blocked because they never get time to write. Okay, so now we have the problem. We have so specifically for whom I'm going to solve it. And then I write down, well, how? And often I love it when it's steps. I'm a sort of how-to kind of person. There are a lot of blog posts that are more aspirational, but I tend to be like, okay, what are 3 to 5 steps to make it super easy for someone? And then I have a bullet point list of sometimes the steps aren't that clear. I just write down 20 things that could help. And then I cluster them into themes. I try to end up with 3 steps or so. I always have an example for each step so that it's not just theoretical, but I have a story from a client or for myself on what you can do. Maybe journaling prompts, because I tend to write about writing. So I tell people journal about this question. And then having some sort of conclusion that wraps it all up and makes the reader feel like this is what you've learned, and go to give them a little tip of here's the one thing you should start with. Go and do it now. Some sort of call to action at the end, right? I tend to find that when I have all of this outlined beforehand, I feel quite confident then when I'm going into the writing. If I just think I can start writing immediately, I produce probably a lot of words, but they will be like the wrong way around and I'm being quite judgmental. So I like to separate the planning from the writing so that I have a mini planning session. It's really creative. You can even do it on the whiteboard or on your computer if you have some sort of cool software to do that. And once I've figured this out, then I go and write it down and I just follow my own plan and it's super fast and then it's done.
And roughly how long do you recommend we create blog posts to be? Because I've heard lots of different recommendations out there. Anything from 400 words up to like 2,000. Is there a sweet spot?
So for me, the sweet spot is between 800 and 1,200 words. And when I say that, I visualize a blog on the page. So it should not be all text, but it should be lots of smaller headlines, a 1-line sentence, then 3 lines, then another headline, then another 1-liner, then another 5 lines. So to really break it up, because now we read digitally most of the time as blog posts for sure, right? And so it needs to be visual. And if you have to scroll 10 times down, I think it's probably too much. There is a little tip that I have. So I blog on medium.com, which is fantastic. And the great thing is when you put your blog post in there, it tells you how long is that read. So it'll look at how many words it is, right? Let's say 800 words. And it'll tell you this will be a 4-minute read. And I love that because sometimes I have so many ideas. I'm just, as a coach, you have all these complex tips and like all these stories, right? You tend to overwrite. If it says this is a 10-minute read, I know that unless this is my super fan client, no one's going to read it. So then I trim it down, turn it into 2 articles. So, but this is quite nice on Medium. You can see how long it would be, but 800 to 1,200, I think is a good digestible thing. It also forces you to narrow down to the key message and not put in 20 different messages because that also will overwhelm the reader.
Got it. And moving on to book writing now, very briefly. So if somebody out there is thinking about generating some ideas for a book, like, hey, what kind of commitment is that? Because I speak to some authors and when I hear some of the number of words that they have to write, it just puts me off because I'm like, there's no way I could write that much. So what sort of typical length of book do people write? And again, could you give some tips for anyone who's starting off and thinking about it?
So a book like Atomic Habits is probably going to be 70 to 80,000 words. I actually went and calculated a lot of self-help book words, but it's around, I think, 70 to 80,000 words. But there are a lot of, I'm thinking self-help and business book at the moment, a lot of these type of books that are actually much shorter, like a novella, if we are thinking fiction. So a lot of these books can be a little book, like 40,000 words, for example, Or if you're just writing an ebook for a very specific audience, solving one specific problem for them, and you want to put it on your website, that could be 10,000 words. And we should never forget, yes, we start out with, okay, I have to write 40,000 words, but essentially all you're doing is writing 20 blog posts, and every day you write one, or every other day you write one. I have a specific process and a starter kit for free. So I'll send you the link for the show notes, a book starter kit. But essentially, it's the same as a blog post. You need to know, who is it for? What problem is it solving? In which way is it going to do that? And then you figure out from that key message, you figure out the outline. And most book outlines are the same. I work with template outlines. You fill in the template, you make a writing plan, and you realize, okay, if I want this done in 4 months, if I do my 6 chapters, each chapter is 2,500 words, boom, you go down. And I actually calculate that with my clients, and we end up with a number. I did that just yesterday with someone, 277 words per day. And then his thing would be finished within the time he set. And he saw that number and he said, 277 per day, that's half a page. I think I can do that. And that's a very different thing than thinking, oh my God, I have to write like a huge book.
I think my problem is, like you were saying, you're a bit of a perfectionist. I feel I have that problem at times because I'll write something and then I'll go back to it and I'll keep refining it and changing it. And actually, I haven't done very much writing at all because I'm just still amending this one little bit. And I wish I could just let it be and just carry on writing and then maybe come back to it and start amending stuff. But it's almost like I'm trying to get perfect from the start. And I know that's a problem. I don't know how to rectify it. Any help?
So I have that exact same problem, right? But I also have a tool, and it's a very simple tool. I call it the 3-hat method. So imagine you are sitting at your desk, you have, 3 baseball caps or something in different colors, right? And so imagine that when you sit down for your session, you put on only one hat at a time. And the first hat could be the hat of the planner. So this is where you do outlining, you do mind maps, you read something around your topic. It's all about planning out what you want to write later. So this is the planner hat. Now, you can put that down and put on the drafting hat. And when you put on the drafting hat, you are allowed to write new words. They can be half-baked and just rough ideas, but you are not allowed to go back to planning and overread even more. And you're not allowed to edit and make them better. You are just drafting. And I try with most of my clients, I try to get them to the first draft of the book all the way through without editing at all, right? I will read what they say and I'll give them tips on how to work on the next chapter, but I never let them edit on the current chapter because they would never get beyond chapter 3. There are a million, maybe even more book authors or aspiring authors who never got beyond chapter 3 because of that problem of editing too soon. Now, the third hat is editing hat. So you can put away the drafting hat, you put on your editing hat, and then with a bit of distance, you can be critical. You can analyze your text. You can see all the things that aren't working and make them better and fix the problem. But if you wear all the 3 hats at the same time, you're still thinking through it, trying to write new text and editing yourself at the same time, you are constantly bombarded with all these thoughts. It's not good enough. You haven't read enough. Don't keep writing. You should edit this immediately. I cannot function like this. So this is why we like to take it apart and be very intentional. Which hat are you wearing today? I actually write it in my calendar. I don't just say writing session. I say, okay, today I'm the planner. Tomorrow I'm the drafter. And this is in my writing planner, the Write Habit Planner as well. I ask people, are you the planner? Are you the editor? Or are you the drafter today? To distinguish that. And then I will say one more thing on top of the 3-hat method. There is an element of discomfort in drafting new things. I think it's the same for when you have in tech, I can only imagine when you have a problem, you need to solve it. You're not quite there yet. It's a bit exciting, but also you haven't really figured it out yet. And you feel maybe a little bit dumb or you feel like, it's not coming together. And so that discomfort is part of the game. And the writing practice is to sit with the discomfort, realize that it's there, and allow that it's not quite fixed yet, and just keep putting something in until you know that it's time to edit or, let's say, to fix it later. So the discomfort is part of the game, and I think we can bear it. We just need to trust it'll be okay.
Oh, I love that technique. It reminds me of certain techniques we use in product development. This Disney model has these three different perspectives where we have like a critical thinker and then someone who's a visionary, and then you have the realist. And it is about really looking at the product. And in this case, it's the writing, but from different lenses, but not all three at the same time, which absolutely makes sense. I'll try your tip for sure. So thank you for that. And moving on, the dreaded acronym AI. Is that an acronym that scares you in the field that you work in, or do you embrace it? And what are your thoughts on AI?
You know what? I embrace it cautiously. And so I recommend to my writers that they write their own book. I tend to not want to send them to ghostwriters, although I know many of them. And I tend to not want to send them to AI to write the whole book because it'll be quite generic and not feel authentic. But to tease out ideas, to create an initial outline, to find an example you may not have thought of, AI is brilliant. And the thing is, AI is just like any software, right? You need to write some code, you put something in, and it'll push something out back to you, right? And so the quality of what you put into AI, the prompts you give it, it's almost like I used to work in R, which is software, right? You have to write a good function, otherwise nothing will work. So the quality of the prompt you give AI, if that's a good prompt, it can give you a really great, let's say, list of ideas, list of headlines, list of an outline. And then you as a human being don't have the blank page anymore. You're not staring at the screen thinking, oh my God, I have to come up with an idea. But you can then use it and work from it and make it your own with your own voice, your own stories, and your own sort of emotional connection that you're going to build to the reader in some way. And so I have ChatGPT open, and whenever I need it, I use it. I also use my automatic writing in the morning, which is really very much in going into my subconscious. And I don't have a problem holding those two things at the same time and feeling like I'm a authentic writer with integrity. So this is how I function. I don't feel in danger of AI. I think people still want human connection, but they also want really cool ideas and have some inspiration that is easy and fast. And why not?
And again, I really like the way you brought those two perspectives together, the sort of automatic writing, which is very human, and then that AI side. And you're right, like I do the same whenever I'm looking for some inspiration for ideas. I'll actually brainstorm with ChatGPT for a while, and it's almost like my subconscious talking back to me. Nicole, we're running fast out of time, and I'd love to ask you one of my favorite questions on the show. If I could give you any superpower to abolish something in the world of work for 24 hours, what might that be?
It would be rumination and overthinking, because I noticed for myself and my clients, underneath all the worrying and the trying to figure out everything all at once and like thinking into the future and catastrophizing all the things that could happen and go wrong, underneath all that buzz is a layer of deep understanding, insight, knowledge, and integrity that we tend to not see. And it's very hard to be sort of really present and have that clarity. And if I could abolish that, we would basically all end up trusting ourselves, trusting our gut, our intuition, just being creative and maybe doing something wrong, but we would just feel, okay, fine, I'll manage. I'll go in the new direction after that. And to establish that trust, wouldn't that be amazing if we could just get rid of all that worry and overthinking? So that's what I would get rid of if I could. Then I would probably be out of a job then because everyone would be writing their book very easily.
That's true. If you don't worry, then you don't need help. Yeah. Okay. Let's only do it for 24 hours. There we go. Then we'll get you more work after that. So Nicole, I'm sure people want to know, how can they get in touch with you if they want to find out more? And if you've got any place where people can go to find some of those hints and tips, some of the templates you talked about as well, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So my website is NicoleJanz.com. I'm sure you can put it in the show notes. Not everyone knows how to spell that, Janz. I am on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn, Dr. Nicole Janz. And all my freebies and tips and templates and all of these things, you just follow me basically, and I will regularly post these things and make them available to everyone.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Nicole. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I've learned loads. And I selfishly use this podcast for my own learning, if I'm honest. And if it helps others, then brilliant. I am selfish that way. So thank you for sort of bearing with me and just sharing all those insights.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
It's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with me via LinkedIn and drop me a message and let me know your favorite takeaways from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Superpower School newsletter so that you can be notified of all future episodes. Simply visit the website www.superpowers.school. Thank you once again.